Welcome to our first episode of GloryPods. I'm your host, Ashton Perez, and this is going to be a platform and a podcast where we just share people's experiences and people's lives on how God's intervened and just glorify God and how people and how God's come into people's lives and help guide them and transform their life. And so for the first episode, I figured it'd be great to share my testimony on how I heard my friend in heaven, which has led me to Jesus, which ultimately transformed my life. And so instead of me rambling on about my testimony, I figured it'd be appropriate to have my blood brother, who is 3 years apart, who grew up with me on the island of Kauai, interview me. And that way I can share my testimony experiences through this interview. And I figured it'd be intimate because he has a background. He went to college for journalism and communications. And so I just figured this would be appropriate for him to interview me. He knows me very personally. He grew up with me. And so I just pray that this glorifies God, that God speaks through us, and that this just hopefully reaches somebody and brings them some hope in a hopeless time. And so with no further ado, let's welcome Ryan Perez.
What is up? Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. And I'm super excited with what you're starting and what you're going to see how it grows and what it turns into, because this is really awesome. I think it's going to be a great platform to connect people and continue your journey and your path with following God.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man. And I'm glad that you can be the first guest on with it to help kind of glorify God in this moment. So before we start the interview, can I pray us in?
Yep, let's do it.
Okay. Heavenly Father, we come to you right now. We want to thank you, Lord, for our salvation. Thank you for saving us when we couldn't save ourselves. Lord, thank you for sending down your son, Jesus Christ, to die on that cross and rise from the dead, Lord, and give us an opportunity to have eternal life, Lord. Thank you for that salvation. I just pray that this conversation glorifies you. It's all about you. Don't make it about us. Don't make it about me war storing, Lord. I just pray that it just brings glory and power to you and how powerful you are and how powerful you can be in everyone's lives when they seek you, Lord. You love every single one of us. And I pray you just glorify this conversation. I pray you protect Ryan. And I ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Awesome, brother. So yeah. So how's your day going?
It's been good. Super excited to have this interview with you and help tell your story, because I came up with some questions that you don't even know what questions I'm going to be asking you today, but I did come up with some questions that I want to start with, from day one to how you got to where you are today doing this podcast and giving your testimony and spreading the word. So if you're ready, we can just dive right into it.
Amen. Yeah. And like Ryan said, I don't know these questions coming up. So I told him, don't hold anything back. Let's go as personal as we can. And so this is going to be a vulnerable time, just expressing my story, my honest truth. And so like I said, I hope this no war story just brings glory to God. And so, yeah, let's kick it off, Ryan.
All right. So just to get right into it, and just to it's almost like an icebreaker question, but I want to see, it's kind of an interesting question, but what is your first memory as a child? What's your first thing that comes to your mind? Your very first memory as a child? When you think as far back as you can, what is it?
That's a really good question, Ryan. I actually never thought about that. But if I had to go back to my first memory, I would have to say it would be probably in Maui when I was in preschool. Just swinging on the swings, playing on the playground. I remember this girl that I was really into. I remember my best friend, Christian. And I just remember it was a really fun time. And I loved just that environment, the outside playground. That was like it was like a tree fort kind of thing. And that's probably, to go back, my first memory would be preschool.
Was it a pretty peaceful place?
Yeah, it was a very peaceful place. Nice.
Now you said Maui, so can you describe what it was like growing up in Hawaii? What was that experience like?
Yeah. So, as you were born in Maui, I was born in Miami, and we moved to Maui when I was in preschool. Mm-hmm. And so growing up in Hawaii, I'm forever grateful that I grew up there. I mean, it was one of the most beautiful experiences I could have ever asked for. I've learned so much through those experiences about myself, and just moving to California, I really realized, reflecting back, of how grateful and beautiful Hawaii truly is. But in that, in the beauty, there's a lot of darkness too. And so I always tell people Hawaii is an amazing, beautiful place, tropical paradise, but there's also, like everywhere, right, there's also darkness inside there. And so
yeah, Nice. And then can you tell me a little bit about your education experience in Hawaii? Were you popular? Were you bullied? Elementary school, how was that for you?
Yeah, so growing up in Kauai, being a white is obviously it's interesting because a lot of people speak about white privilege and whatnot, but growing up in Hawaii, sometimes being white goes against you. And that stems back from just how Hawaii was taken over by the whites. It used to be its own kingdom with the king and queen, and then the white came and took over the land and slaughtered many Hawaiians. And so with that being said, it sometimes goes against you being white. So I definitely got bullied a lot, all the way actually until fifth grade. I got picked on like there was no tomorrow.
No. So I just want to get into it. We also went to church at a very young age, pretty much from day one. I remember mom and dad used to make us match. We'd be wearing the same like polo and shoes and shorts and everything. Did you enjoy going to Catholic church when we were young, when we were kids? Did you enjoy it?
So that's actually like my first time being introduced to church, right? We were forced to go to a Catholic church. And like you said, we had to dress uniform. We had to have matching shoes. We had to have our hair combed to the side, shirt tucked in, a belt. I hated it. I honestly hated it. It was like a forceful thing. We had to go every single Sunday. I don't really even remember much of what I was taught there. I went through the first communion and the whole 9 yards, but I kind of later found out in my life that it was honestly more to please dad's mom, which is our abuela, our grandma, than it was for us to be educated about God and the word and going there for that reason. It was more just for the look kind of. So I don't remember it much, but my memory is I did not like it.
Got it. So although we kind of just stopped going pretty abruptly, and it was out of our control because we were just kids, it wasn't really like we had control over going to church at that age. Why do you think we stopped going to church?
So why I think we stopped going to church was because it honestly was because of the divorce. So when our parents got divorced, we would go pretty religiously every single Sunday. And once that divorce happened, it was like as if no more church, we're done with that, and it became kind of a destructive, toxic world in a way, because of the divorce being so toxic. So yeah, we kind of put church and that was out the window as soon as the divorce kind of started.
And so how would you say our parents' divorce mentally impacted you?
So the parents' divorce impacted me a lot because I just kind of grew up with this image that we have a family, right? We traveled, we take the Christmas photos, we all smile. And I thought everything was fine, right? This is like my family. And then one day for it not to be fine and for it to be ripped apart was very confusing for me. It was very hard for me to accept. And then the destructive, just the hatred between each other, just the talking down on each other, from being in a loving relationship to just hating each other didn't make sense to me. It made me question a lot of what they taught me. And so it impacted me in tremendous ways. And it kind of started me off on my own journey because I realized what they're telling me isn't truth, right? It's kind of switching and now it's changed up because of this event. Now they're changing the way that they speak. And so that kind of caused me to just let me go find truth somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think our parents were a little concerned with how we would handle it. So we started seeing a therapist, a counselor, basically, at a very young age. Do you kind of remember that experience? And what are your thoughts from that experience? Do you remember who we used to meet with? And what are your thoughts from that whole experience seeing a counselor, like every weekend and just talking more about having a split family?
Yeah, so great question. So that's kind of what started us with this therapist, because when parents get divorced, they recommend that the kids go through some kind of therapy, right? To have someone help break it down and have them understand what's going on sometimes, because when a family rips apart, it's sometimes hard for the kids to understand. So that's when we first got introduced to Dr. Gerard, who later became my anger management therapist. But during the divorce days, she was just into our lives to help us understand the divorce. And she would show us kids' books about parents splitting up. Like I remember this one book was like a dinosaur family, and the parents split up, and it kind of showed what life looked like after these dinosaurs split up. And so it was just kind of helping understand what was happening, because
how we can cope with it.
Basically. Yeah, how we can cope with it and having someone to talk to about it. It just based on our emotions, right? She was kind of that open ear lady who wasn't biased and just was willing to listen to what was happening in our lives.
Mm-hmm. And this was all pretty much like elementary and middle school for both of us. And then, you were saying how in elementary school, you're already being bullied up until like 5th grade. So I want to fast forward a little bit to high school now. And when we were in high school, did you get good grades? Did you play any sports? How involved were you at the school? Were you, in the student council? What were you doing? Were you with writing for the school newspaper? How was high school for you?
Yeah, great question. So, like I said, I got picked on from elementary school all the way to 5th grade. And like that really did impact my life because I had a bad stuttering problem when I was in kindergarten and 1st grade where I couldn't even say a sentence clear. Like it was like da, 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 kick. Like I couldn't speak at all. And so that allowed a lot of kids to find an opportunity to pick on me because of I couldn't my speech impediment. And so that also didn't help with like my mom tucked in my shirt, combed my hair to the side. So I had a speech impediment, hair combed to the side, and I kind of looked like that pretty white boy. And then she always taught me to tell the teacher if I see anything wrong. So I kind of became a tattletale, and it just was a down spiral, right? No one liked me. No one wanted to accept me. And so when I did become accepted around 6th grade, it was a big deal for me, because I got picked on for so long. And so to have friends, to be offered to go to the movies, to do things, to be on MSN Messenger till 1 a.m, even though I got school at 6, I would.
Yeah. So like, I mean, not to cut you off, but so I mean, like you obviously had this rough at a young age, started out rough for you with being bullied, with having your parents split up, which those bullies obviously didn't know maybe what you're going through. And then now we're going to high school, right? So you have your friends, things are starting to feel more normal for you, maybe, so to say.
Yep.
So did you start getting good grades, and what was that like? Were you popular, playing sports, athletic? Like,
So yeah,
what
so middle school, I was just grateful to like be accepted to go to movies and dances, and so my grades weren't that good in middle school. Like they were passing, but they weren't outstanding or anything. And so I was just wanted the social life. I didn't care about school. I just wanted to be social, but mom and dad weren't accepting of that. So when 9th grade rolled around, that's when my grades actually hit high honors roll. I almost got a 4.0, I think 3.8 GPA.
Nice.
That's when I joined the tennis group. And so my first freshman year was actually a really good year. And I was still doing social activities. So I was kind of balancing this lifestyle because, in middle school, I was all about social. And so now I kind of found this rhythm of where I could do social and I could do school.
Nice. And then, I mean, I remember just a little turning point going from, that freshman year for you where you're playing tennis and you're super involved with the school, getting good grades. And I remember there was a turning point at some age. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but I know you kind of started doing some drugs. How old were you when you tried your very first drug? Were we already backtracked in middle school, or were you in high school
No. So at this point, I was in high school. So
Okay.
it was about summer of freshman year is when I first tried smoking marijuana.
So after your freshman year.
Yep, after my freshman year. Yep.
Okay. And then
And my whole freshman year, my grades kept getting better. I went to honors roll, high honors roll, to principals list. That's what the last one was.
Yeah.
And so I finished the year good. got most improved in tennis. And what the shifting point was is some of my really close friends decided to get into to weed. And it's interesting because I had a whole view on weed that was like I was against weed, that it's damaging. Why would someone smoke? Why would someone hurt their lungs? And I was adamant about not doing weed. I used to try to convince my friends not to smoke weed. And so they got into it. And then sure enough, because I wanted to be accepted, right? I didn't want to lose that friendship and that being outcast again. I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to try smoking weed. And so that's kind of what opened up that door for me to smoke weed. And I remember I didn't even really know what I was doing. I didn't really know if I really wanted to do it. I just wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be in the group.
So were you about 14, 15 when you tried it?
Yeah, I would say about 14.
Okay. Yeah. And then I remember it became more of a regular thing for you where you're smoking weed on a regular basis. It started kind of hurting your grades. And then next thing you know, my brother's running away. And you're getting a great private school education in high school. Everything was going well. And then all of a sudden now, my brother's on the run. What's going on? Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe the story about why you ran away and how you even got to this point, like from the day you ran away, what happened that day? But also let's talk about why you did that.
Yeah. So summer freshman year, I get introduced to weed, and I end up enjoying it, right? It wasn't as bad as I kind of thought it was or created it to be. And so that led me to want to smoke more. That led me to want to start drinking more because a lot of my friends started drinking beer at that time. And so that led me to steal our stepdad's Coors Light in our downstairs fridge, go to my neighbor's house. They had an outside fridge, steal their Coronas, and so I kind of started getting into this. I wanted to be accepted, right? It all went back to wanting to be in the social group. It didn't matter about the schooling as much. And so me wanting to be accepted in the social group, that sophomore year rolled around and opportunities came around where after school, let's go smoke weed. Let's go hang out. Let's go maybe drink. Let's go do something else, right? Instead of doing tennis practice. And so I started kind of playing that gamble game where, I could only go to tennis practice once or twice. I started thinking I was really good. I didn't really need practice anymore. I started getting cocky. And so I started skipping practices. And then my grades slowly dropped pretty significantly because I stopped doing homework. I was always out and about trying to hang out with friends and smoke weed and do my thing. And so my grades dropped. I stopped skipping tennis. And so I couldn't play tennis anymore because of my grades. So I had to sit down with this Sean Magoon. You remember the sports athlete director in our school and our tennis coach. And I had to sit down and they had to sit down with me and tell me that I can't play anymore because my grades are 1.7. I think it got to a 1.7.
Wow. So you went from like almost a 4.0
to a 1.7. So I'm skipping tennis. My grades are dropped. I can't play tennis anymore. And so that's when mom and dad took all these variables and said, okay, something's happening.
Like, and what's going on? Yeah.
Something shifted bad time. And during that time, because I didn't see eye to eye with mom or dad, I would rebel against them a lot, right? I would fight against a lot of what they would ask me to do and say. And so with that rebellion, it kind of led to this anger and this temper, right? I would lose it. I would go crazy. And I'm sure you remember, like I would punch holes in the wall. I would damage the house. And so I didn't align with the way they wanted to raise me anymore, right? I wanted to do my own thing, but they had all these variables like you were doing so good, now you're doing so bad. So they gave me this ultimatum. You either move to Oahu with your dad or you go to the Second Nature Wilderness Program, this therapeutic wilderness program. And so I looked at them, I'm like, I'm not doing any of those,
And I think when they gave you these options too, they knew you were smoking weed and you were kind of skipping practices and doing all that stuff, right? They knew you were.
Yeah.
They found weed. Yeah.
But to be clear, so my sophomore year, this kind of progressed, right? This took place on my whole sophomore year. So my whole sophomore year was just a downward where my GPA was a horrible at the end. And then junior year rolled around and I was supposed to be like the top dude in tennis. And that's when my grades were still so bad immediately off the bat. And that's when they had to sit down and say, you can't play. So this happened around my junior year. My sophomore year was like my downhill spiral of me just being social, trying new things, drinking, smoking weed, allowing my temper and anger to express itself at home, be destructive and just be rebellious, right? I want to do my own thing and ignore the what they asked.
And the part that I love about this, though, is that you're faced with two options now. Mom and dad give you two options. And sometimes, the option that you want is maybe not the best option, right? Sometimes you have this desire where you're like, I'd rather do this. And it's like, that might not be the right thing for you in this moment. So you had your two options, go to Oahu or go to this wilderness program. And you didn't want that?
Yeah. So, but how that ultimatum came about was at school, the principal, the vice principal, our therapist, and then mom and dad went to have a sit down meeting at the school, just going over about where I'm at, my grades, that I can't play tennis anymore. And so I knew that was a serious thing because dad lived on Oahu at that time. So he had to fly over from Oahu and come to Kauai for this meeting to help improve my grades and get me back on track, right? That was the meeting, get me back on track. But my therapist, Dr. Gerard, the one from the divorce, was driving all the way from Lahui for this meeting. And so they go into the meeting and they didn't let me go in at first. So it was all the mom, vice principal, they all go in at first and then they come out and mom's crying and dads won't even look at me. And that's when Dr. Gerard says, we have to finish this meeting at my office because we're talking about legal issues, and so we can't share privacy things here. So we got to finish the meeting at my office. And this is middle of a school day, So I'm like, okay, so that's when I jumped in dad's car He had a rental car. He's like, Ashton, hop in with me. And I said, no problem. And I thought I could kind of convince him that I'm going to get things back on track. Don't worry.
Yeah.
And that's when I hop in his car. We drive to Dr. Gerard's office. We go upstairs and it went right to the ultimatum. Like you said, you have two decisions, right? Your grades are bad. This is happening. This is happening. So with that being said, you have two options. And it was almost as if like they weren't even going to listen to what I had to say, how I was going to bounce back.
Yeah.
It was, this is the options. And I realized at that moment that my backpack was in my dad's rental car. And so I was like, oh, I need that backpack, right? So I told him I need my backpack. And he goes, okay. He goes, just please listen to Dr. Gerard. She's going to explain about the program and what it does. And I was like, I need my backpack. So I stand up and I book it outside the office, right? Go straight to the rental car and the door's locked. And that's when I see my backpack right there on the bottom of the thing. And I take my shirt off and I was going to break the window. And so I punched the window. It kind of shook. And then I went to hit it again. And that's when I saw this lady peer out her window, like staring at me. And I could tell she's about to call the cops. So I was like, okay, the cops can't come right now because then I'm done, right? Then I'm going to be submissive. So I went back in the office and I was like, I need my backpack. Daddy's like, okay, just listen to Dr. Gerard. I'll go get your backpack. I said, okay. So that's when he went and got the backpack. And she's telling me my daughter went there. It's such a good program. It helps so many kids. And I'm just in my head just thinking, I need to get out of here now. Right. And she's like, and I'm emotional. I'm tearing up. My mom's bawling, crying. She's emotional. Dad comes up, gives me the backpack. And that's when I stand up and I said, okay, you guys have two options. Either you're going to compromise with me and we're going to figure out a deal, or you'll never see me again. I'll be gone forever. And they're like, you don't run, don't do that. And I said, okay, I'm out of here. And that's when I took the bag. And from there, I left the office and I was gone. That was day one of the runaway.
Okay. So that's how we got to the runaway. And then you were gone for how long?
5.5 weeks, almost 6 weeks, I think. 6 weeks.
So over a month.
Yeah, about a month and a half.
Wow. On the run.
Yep.
On a small island. So how did you pull that off without getting caught? Like, how did you don't have to go into too much detail about this, but how did you eat? How did you get money? How are you surviving? Where did you sleep at night? Maybe throw out a few places where you're sleeping. Were you at your friends' houses? Were you just randomly in the street somewhere?
Yeah. So the first 2.5 weeks, mom left my cell phone on, right? Because she figured she could call every number that I've called in the 2 weeks and try to find a whereabouts of where I am, right? Someone would give out where they've seen me or last been with me. And at the first 2 weeks, it was kind of like a little vacation. I was kind of hopping to friends' houses, staying at friends' houses, going to the beach, surfing, right? Not really thinking much of anything, right? It wasn't like I saw cops out looking for me or like I saw my picture out anywhere. So the first 2 weeks were mellow. She kept my phone on. And then I think
what are you doing during school days? Because all your friends are at school, so are you just at the beach?
Yeah, I'd go to the beach. I had a lot of friends that dropped out of school. So they'd be just surfing and cruising at the beach. And I had older friends that already graduated. So I would just kind of mingle around with the guys that I knew that were outside of school, right? And then when school ended, I would hang out with the friends that were in school. I'd kind of just fluctuate, right? Whoever was available, whoever wanted to hang out, I'd be going and hanging out with them. So 2 weeks were like, I'm going around vacation. So then she's calling every number that I've called on my cell phone and no one's giving out my whereabouts. And now she's getting frustrated. So she turns the phone off. Done. That's not helping me. I'm not getting anywhere with that. So she turned the phone off. And that's when they kind of took action a little more seriously. That's when they put me in the Kauai newspaper. I was in the front page newspaper, right? Missing teen. They put me in the Hawaii State News. So every island on the news channel showed me because they didn't know if I left Kauai at this point. Because as the week started adding up, they started like, I don't even know if it's on Kauai because like you said, Kauai is so small. And so I was so kind of good at like moving around and not being seen too much where I could get caught. And I knew people who would probably rat me out, who would probably call mom. So I made sure to stay away from them. I kind of had a whole system. And then I also knew through diversions out there, like I would tell them I'm sleeping in the canyon. I'm sleeping on Polaholi Beach. I'm sleeping in O'Malley Valley.
But you never were.
No, because I was never sleeping. I was always at friends' house, but I never wanted to put them at risk, right? Because they're aiding a teen runaway, which is, I think, a felon. Felony. So I was trying to avoid as minimal damage from my action as possible, right? And mom even walked some of these valleys looking for me. And so I would call friends for, yeah, that's how I got cash. I would ask like girls that I knew that had money, hey, can I borrow $60? Can I borrow
For
40
food
bucks
or for what?
for weed? Honestly, because
Yeah.
the food, I mean, usually the moms would buy food for the house and I would kind of eat the meals with the kid, I would just like whatever the mom, and I was grateful for all the moms that really helped me out through that whole
So
experience. So
you're
they
looking for money for drugs,
for
for
weed,
weed,
yeah, for
for weed.
smoking weed, for keep my habit going in a way.
Got
Yeah,
it.
for sure.
Okay, so then, I mean, eventually you obviously get caught, and then you're faced with your two options again.
Well,
So,
6 weeks pass and it gets bad. It gets to a point where I'm on the newspaper, Hawaii State News. I'm on flyers, and then they put a $500 reward out for me. I don't know if you remember that, right? And
yeah,
that's when I knew people were gonna wrap me out for $500, right? I knew $500 is in when you put that in front of someone, a lot of people will take the money for, turning in their
yeah,
friend or yeah. So I knew it put me at a whole risk. So I had to hide out now. Now I had to stay at houses. I couldn't go to the beach. I couldn't do my normal things. And I was staying at one of my friend's house for 2 weeks, like caving out, like literally caving out, waiting for him to come home from school. And it wasn't fun. I was miserable. And so how I got caught was I wanted to go to the beach one day. I was like, I need to go surf. I need to go to in the ocean. And I left his house. I took the bus, and the whole ride from the east side to the south side, I was like thinking everyone knew who I was. They're all calling the cops. Everyone's like, I was paranoid. I was constantly thinking, um, everyone knows about me. So then I get to the beach, I surf, and then school rolls around, and I see everyone starting, all the kids come in, like, because when school rolled around, the beach got crowded. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I got to go hide. I ran in my friend's truck, and I'm hiding in the truck. And that's when my buddy ended up ratting me out for $500. And so the cops came, arrested me, and pretty much directly from that beach took me to the airport. And that's when dad went and escort me in handcuffs to Utah. Right. So I didn't have
oh,
the
so
two
you went straight.
options.
So you go straight to the wilderness program.
It was
Um,
straight to wilderness program. At that point, there was no maybe living at dad's house anymore. It was, you're going to Utah for this therapeutic wilderness program, and you have no options.
got it. And then, so dad flew you out there, and how was your experience at the wilderness program? Maybe you can give us like a short, quick story, just to summarize that whole experience. Because I know it was a lot. I know you did a lot, and you were kind of isolated from everyone in your family, all your friends. But can you give us a little story about what that looked like for you, that whole experience in Utah?
Yeah, of course. So it's funny because growing up in Hawaii, like I'm an outdoor dude, right? I spent all my time outdoor, right? In jungles and the mountains and forests and the beach and all types of terrain. And so I'm thinking a wilderness therapeutic program, like this is going to be a cakewalk, right? Like there's going to be some cabins and like the woods, and it's going to be like a relaxing little kind of joke, like I just got to do these little picnics that we talk, I just figured,
Like a little summer camp, maybe.
yeah, I figured I had a whole different imagination of what it was going to be. And it was crazy because when I first got there, it was like we literally drove 6 hours in the middle of the desert, nowhere. And there was like 6 kids huddled around a fire with a ripped up tarp over them. And like, I mean, they're muddy. And I just realized like, oh wow, this is the outback. Like this is living on the land without like any resources. And it humbled me, it humbled me a lot. Like I learned how to make a fire with sticks, bust a fire with no flint, no, like just straight off the earth, and I learned a lot of things about survival, hiking, plants that burn, different wood. So I gained a lot of insight, and I learned a lot about myself because I had a lot of time to think. I had a lot of time to be in nature. I had a lot of time to be grounded. I had a lot of time to realize why I was starting to make all these decisions that got me to this program, why I ran away, why I did all this. I kind of figured out like, oh, this is, who I was. I kind of figured out who I was in that program. But it was one of the most difficult things I've ever gone through. And I'm forever grateful for it. It's helped me to who I am today, but it was definitely a challenge. I hiked like 90 something miles with a 65, 70-pound pack, and I just did a lot of things that I never thought I could do. And I challenged myself, and I learned a lot about myself. So it was really good.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember when you came out, like we couldn't even talk to you on the phone or anything. We had to write letters to you, and it was all written communication. We couldn't hear from you, watch a video with you, or anything like that. No video communication. It was very isolated for that chunk of time. And then you obviously get out, you come back. So what was that like going from being isolated, no technology, living basically like ancient times to coming back where you're seeing bright lights and you're not in the mountains anymore. There's cars zooming by. There's fast food right there. Like what was that like?
Yeah, so it's crazy because when I first got in there, my first night, I was begging. I was crying. I was crying, laying there on the dirt with my sleeping bag, looking up at the stars, going, "How did I get here? Why am I here? I didn't feel like I belonged there." And I was crying and I was begging, if there is any kind of God or anything out there, please just take me back to Hawaii. I want to get out of here. It was raining. It was muddy. My first night was just, it was a very humbling night for me to realize like where I was, what I was going to be going through. And so with me getting out, right, I was there for 10 and a half weeks, 11 weeks. By the time I got out, I didn't want to leave. When they called my goodbye group, it was like, I didn't want to leave. I loved it. I loved being out in the middle of nowhere. I loved hearing the animals. I loved being away from everything. I did. It was the most peaceful, incredible thing I could ever describe. And so when it was time to leave, it was almost like I didn't want to leave, even though I was looking forward to leaving the whole time, right? It's like, when am I going to get out of here? When time came, it was like, do I even want to go? It was interesting, and so I ended up leaving, and that's when mom picked me up in Utah, and we're on the freeway in the first time in 11 weeks. And the radio's giving me a headache, and like the cars, and there's just a lot of going on. It's a lot of activity, and the billboards. I remember it was just a lot of stress. And we pulled into McDonald's because I always said I want my first meal and made McDonald's when I get out. And I was eating very clean in there, like no sugar, all oats and granola grains. I was eating really, really healthy in there. And so when I went and had McDonald's, I got like a quarter pounder. I got a shake. I got a soda. I got a fries. I got 2 apple pies, and I ended up puking all of it out before I could even get to the car of from the parking lot. That's my body rejected it because I was so healthy. And like even getting a haircut, the lady was like, "Your hair smells like a complete campfire pit." Because I didn't really even shower for 10 weeks. I mean, I threw a little bucket of cold water over me, but it wasn't anything what most people are imagining. I pooped in the earth. We dug a 3-foot hole every campsite we'd go to, and we'd all share the community poop hole. I mean, just things that most average people could never imagine themselves probably doing. I was forced to do, but I'm so grateful that I did it.
And at a very young age.
Yeah, I was 15 years old.
Yeah. So, I mean, now you're back to your reality, and you go back to school. You were able to graduate, right? Was that?
Yeah. So getting out of the program, I think it's 98% of the kids go to aftercare programs. So after the therapeutic wilderness program, 98% of kids go to a therapeutic wilderness boarding school. So it's like a same kind of thing, but now they're in a boarding school, which is like in the world, in the city, but it's structured. They still have to earn things. They still have to work for things because everything's earned, right? Nothing's given. Like in that program, it's like, it's all about, who you are, and like how you carry yourself and how you work is based on what you reap for that, And so it's kind of an aftercare program. So I was the lucky 2% that didn't have to go to that. And I think a lot of it did have to do with financial reasons, but I was just so grateful that I was not going to that, because I've heard horror stories in some of those boarding schools. And I was like, please don't let me go to that. It's just very controlling, and I don't like to be controlled. And so I got out. I was a 2% that ended up going to Hawaii, but the exception was I'm not going to Kauai. I'm doing the two. I have to do 2 options, right? It was either go to Oahu or do the program. Now
you're doing both.
I'm doing both because I end up having to move to Oahu, and that wasn't fun, to be honest. So I almost prefer to be at the program.
I want to ask you real quick, because you're obviously not doing drugs in the program, but when you got out, how soon after did you get right back into those drugs? Did you ever do that?
Yeah, I did. I want to say even a month.
A month after. Okay.
Yep.
So, but would you say that program shaped your perspective on things?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, a lot about myself. I gained this confidence about myself that I can't describe. Like going back in the world, it was like I realized that like I had these survival traits and these skills and tools that no one else has, and like I can have conversations with people, because like that's all we did was talk. There was no phones, there was no music, there was no distractions. All we did was talk to each other about what's going on in our minds. When we're feeling emotion, when we're feeling feelings, we stop what we're doing and we all talk. So like I came out with this confidence, like I had this insight, and I had this like about myself and about others that like most people won't. I just felt really confident about myself, And so but my view on marijuana never changed in there.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought weed was good. And I'm grateful because I thought they were going to try to brainwash that out of me. Like weed's bad, it kills you, you know? And so I was grateful that they didn't brainwash me in that way. So I always was for weed, but
Uh-huh.
I wasn't for the control, you know, and moving to Oahu, my dad gave me a 5 page contract that I had to follow, that I had to sign, and that I couldn't break. It was almost like I was in jail in a way, but I was in
Uh-huh.
the real world, and I couldn't comply.
Got it. So, I mean, you finished school with the parent, like in Hawaii, and then you moved to California. You know, you're how old when you moved to California? How
Well,
old
there's
were
a
you?
lot that kind of happened between then. Getting back from the program, I moved to Oahu, right? And they have
Uh-huh.
that contract with me, and that lasted probably 6 months till dad and my stepmom couldn't um deal with me anymore. I was too much about wanting to talk about feelings, emotions, checking in. I'm feeling this way. I'm feeling upset. I feel like I miss my friends. And they were like, I don't want to hear this anymore. And so finally that led to me kind of go back to my ways where I'm going to do what I want to do, you know, because you guys aren't understanding. We're not having civil conversations anymore. I felt like, and so I started just like telling them, asking if I could go out to hang out with friends. They would say no, and I would just sneak out. And so
Mhm.
after I would do that, that got dad to finally say, you can't live here anymore. You know, I'm done with you. And that moment was a big moment because he felt so hard with working with me, you know, with sending me to this program, with really just not giving up on me, you know, trying to help shape me. Now he's seen me to be insubordinate, being disobedient, disrespectful, right back again after the program. And so he just kind of lost hope.
Mhm.
And he asked me that night when we got in a big fight, when I ended up sneaking out. He told me to come back home. I come back home. He goes, I'll buy you a ticket to anywhere you want to go. Where do you want to go? I said, back to Kauai. Send me back to Kauai. And so that's when he got me a ticket to Kauai. And I think he
Mhm.
was drunk that night. And the next morning, takes me to the airport. And it was an awkward drive to the airport. And he drops me off. And that's when he told me, he's like, don't ever call me your dad again. You're my biggest regret I've ever had. Um, and yeah, you mean nothing to me.
Wow.
And it was one of the most impactful, hurtful things I think I've gone through with him. And it's when he called mom and was like, yeah, I dropped your son off at the airport, good luck with him, there's no hope for him, da 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 da. And that's when mom called me, and she was nice enough to pick me up at the airport, because I wasn't even going to call her. I was just going to call a friend to pick me up. And she came and picked me up from the airport. And that's when I went back to Kauai, you know, and even from the program and having all that learning and tools, I still got back into with the old friends, got back into smoking weed, and I even got back into doing cocaine during this time after the program. And about my senior year, I started getting into cocaine and smoking Oxycontin, which is a painkiller. I started smoking
Wow.
Oxycontin pills my senior year and doing cocaine. So like I almost started doing heavier drugs than I did before the program, which is insane. And it all went back to being accepted with this group, you know, because Kauai is so small. And I like had this group of people that I felt like were the elite top guys on my side of the island. And so I was willing to do whatever it took to keep that alignment, to keep that relationship. And so that
Mhm.
whether we're doing cocaine tonight, whether we're smoking oxys, and I enjoyed it. I'm not talking like I just did it because I end up enjoying it, right? End up like we did cocaine every weekend. It was like our thing.
Yeah.
Every weekend we do Friday night, Saturday night, we do cocaine. And I would love it. I would stay up all night, talk story, go to the parties. I mean, it was a fun time, but it also was very destructive because like if you ever done cocaine, you know it's a good high, and then it gets miserable. It's not like it's constantly fun. So it's an up and down roller coaster thing. And so I kind of went through this whole roller coaster of emotions and thoughts with doing these drugs.
Wow. And then you somehow still graduated high school.
Yeah, so me running away my junior year, it was like impossible for me to graduate with the school that I was originally going to with my whole class, right? So I was class of 2009, but if I would have graduated with my school I grew up in, I didn't have enough credits because I skipped half my junior year running away. So what ended up happening was the only way I could graduate would be at the public school. So then I went to the public school my senior year where I had enough credits to still graduate with my class of 2009. And my first half, I remember my first semester, I meet with the vice principal, my mom, and she's like, I don't think Ashton's going to graduate. He's failing everything. And like my mom's like looking at, and it was so sad, right? I mean, because after all she's done, and I'm just sitting there seeing like the hopeless in her, that what do you mean you're not going to graduate? And so I from that moment I started, I was like, hey, I have to just graduate. I can't just fail. And so I started just doing what I needed to do to pass. And it came down to a math test. It came down to my last math test. I had to get an A. I had to get A because I had an F to make myself a D so I could walk with my class. And it was like, I barely made it. And it was crazy because the math teacher laughed. He was like, how do you ace? I aced the final. I literally aced. I got like a 98. He's like, how do you ace the final, which is the summary of everything? And then you fail every test, and it just showed that I
Your
was,
potential is there if you
yeah,
really put in the effort and
yeah,
tried. You could do
yeah,
it, but you just
yep,
never felt
yep.
like, yeah.
And so I barely graduated, I think with a 1.6, no, yeah, 1.9 or 1 point low GPA. And it was a big deal for me. It was a big deal. It was one of her happiest moments for sure. So
Yeah,
I'm grateful.
I remember being at your graduation, sitting with her there, and it was just like he pulled it off. He did it. So let's go after your high school now. You moved to California. Why California? Why did you move to California?
So when I graduated high school, so when my dad dropped me off at the airport and said, you're my biggest regret. Don't ever call me your father again. We didn't talk for that whole rest of the year until I graduated, and I was given tickets to who I want to invite to my graduation. And I end up inviting him because his mother passed away. And that's an emotional story too, because what got us back together in a relationship was his mom passing away, our grandma. I wasn't gonna go see her. She was on her deathbed because I was mad at my dad, and I was taking that out on her. So mom convinced me to finally go over there. So I fly over there, and I wanted to fight him. I did not like dad at that time. And that's when abuela, grandma, kicked everyone out of the room and said before she dies, her last wish is that her son and her first grandson get along. And so that's when we hugged and we made up. And so that patched our relationship up, in order for me to invite him to my graduation, So he was able to come to my graduation, and I graduate. And that's when they sat down with me and they were like, okay, so we have two options again. You can either stay in Kauai, but we're not going to support you at all. You're not going to live under a roof. We're not going to give you any money. You're going to be completely independent. Or you can move to California or somewhere else on the mainland, try to go to college, better yourself, and we'll help support you in that. We'll help provide for you for that. So I'm like, okay, I'm down. Let's go to California, right? I've heard beautiful women. I from a tourist, like I heard California is kind of like the party scene. So I was like, I'm down to go check out California. And so that's kind of what catapulted me into California.
Okay, and then what did you do for work when you first moved to California?
So when I moved to California, I was going to El Camino College in Redondo Beach, and I wanted to major in psychology because of the program. I was impacted by the program I went to so much. I wanted to help kids again. I wanted to help adolescent teens break through a lot of trauma and with their parents. A lot of parents have bad relationships with their adolescent, with their teens, and so I wanted to help make amends with that. So I moved here for psychology for school, and then I got a job part-time at the Vons, right down the street from my house.
Okay, what were you doing?
At Vons, I applied and became a bagger.
Got it. Okay. And then, how was that transition for you? Because how old were you when you moved to California?
17.
17.
About to turn 18. So like a few months away from being 18.
Yeah, working and living on your own, working, so trying to support yourself, going to school still. Did you end up ever going to church at that time in your life when you first moved out to California, or not yet? No church or anything.
No.
And were you experimenting with other drugs? Did you try other drugs when you were living in California right when you got there?
Oh yeah. So too back to the church. Yeah. When our parents got divorced, I threw God out the window along with the whole picture of a perfect family and all of that. Why would God do this to my family? So like God became a joke to me my whole life. Honestly, it was never.
My whole upcoming.
Yeah, it was never like God. People go to church. I felt bad for them. They're sad people. Yeah, I just looked down upon that. So your question was, when I moved to California, what other drugs did I get into, or what? Yeah, so moving to California was supposed to be a thing where I like
Because I mean,
better
you're not,
myself.
and the reason I ask that is because you're on your own now. You don't have mom and dad over your shoulder saying, "Hey, don't do this." That you're not sneaking around. You have all the freedom in the world now. The world is your oyster. So what were you doing on your own?
Yeah. So moving to California was supposed to help discipline me and not keep doing drugs and going down that road. But unfortunately, because of my habits and because I could find people who obviously do those drugs, I found those drugs right away again. So I found weed, cocaine, drinking, and I wasn't old enough to drink, but I got someone to get me fake IDs so I could buy liquor because I stole liquor, in Hawaii my whole life, from 15 to all the way to when I moved. So like now they had in California, they have those locks on the bottle. So I was kind of like, okay, I got to find new ways. I got a fake ID to get liquor, smoking weed, cocaine. And then I got into not purposely, but on accident. That's how I tried meth was, I thought I was sniffing cocaine and it turned out it was meth.
And how old were
And
you when you did that?
18,
Wow.
let's say 18 years old. Yeah, I
Mhm.
was 18 years old. I was at my neighbor's house and he sold cocaine. So that's why I was always over there hanging out. He sold cocaine. He would give me free cocaine. We would drink together. We'd go to the bars together. He was a lot older than me, but we had a really good relationship. I mean, not a healthy relationship, but we were friends. We trusted each other. And so he also did meth though. He did 7 years in LA County prison from fighting. So he kind of has a similar background to me. That's what made us relate so much.
Mhm.
And he ended up having a meth habit, right? That was his drug of choice, was methamphetamine. And he knew I was never into that. So he would only give me cocaine because he sold cocaine for money. And one day he was all messed up. He was with a girl in the room and he told me I was going to leave back to my apartment. And he's like, hey, I racked you 3 lines in the living room and so or in the kitchen. So I go out there and I see 3 lines on the living room table. And I just assumed these were like he said the kitchen, but he meant right here, And so I
Oh,
take those lines, but sure enough, that was meth and the coke was in the kitchen, And so, and he was so concerned because it was a lot. It was 3 lines of meth is a lot for someone to first do. It's like,
uh-huh.
it's scary, right? It's almost to the point where it's not even funny. It's like, oh my goodness. And so I didn't sleep for 3 days. I like went crazy. And I thought
Were
it
you,
was
were you
cocaine.
were you going to work or did you have the day
Yeah, I
off?
still go to work, and it got to a point where like I couldn't sleep. And I was taking Benadryl because like it's a allergy medication that helps you make you drowsy. And I was taking these things to try to get me to drowsy where I was so awake in my head, but my body shut down. So I tried to get out of my bed and my body collapsed because I was so drowsy from these
Wow.
uh um allergy medication, and but my brain was so awake, it was crazy. Yeah, it was an interesting experience, but that kind of opened up a door to me, like, because then he told me that I was meth, right? Because he didn't want to tell me for the first like 3 days until like a week after. He was like, dude, I got something to tell you, man. I didn't want to tell you at the time because I was concerned for you. He kept asking me every day, are you okay, Ashton? How you been, man? And I kind of was like in and out of my, yeah, I'm good. Because I just thought I was tripping on this coke. I thought this coke was cut with something, it was bad.
Yeah.
So it kind of opened the door for me to be open to trying meth because he smokes meth. And so that got me to smoke meth a few times with him and whatnot, and kind of opened up that door. And then I also got into crack, right? I had a good friend from Kauai move over here that loved crack. So he started cooking crack. That got me into smoking crack. And I kind of smoked a lot of crack, to be honest, with cocaine, like doing both, right? But if I
So
was with
you're
this,
just so right away you're just already hanging out with the wrong people again,
yeah,
doing all the bad stuff.
you can say so. Yep, for
The
sure.
list could just go on of the drugs you're trying and experimenting with.
Yeah, pills. I tried every single
Yeah.
pill, lorazepam, Norcos, painkillers, I mean, as simple as I mean, you name it, I've probably tried it.
And so let's talk about maybe some friends you made because I mean you talked about your dealer, this guy who you lived close to, but did you ever make any friends in California?
Yeah.
Um, a few years after you lived there, some friends that maybe impacted you in a positive way. Were there any relationships you had?
Yeah, for sure. So when I got hired at that Vaughn's on the street, I end up getting offered to work back in the meat department from the meat manager. And that became my career for 12 years. I got in the meat department. I went through an apprenticeship. I became a butcher. I became a
Mhm.
meat manager for 9.5 years. I ran 5 different stores. it was an incredible experience. I gained so much knowledge and wisdom from that. And that friend, that manager that first asked me to go back there is still one of my best friends to this day. So
Wow.
him and I are really close. We talk all the time. I mean, almost every other day. And so I'm super blessed and grateful God put him in my life and gave me an opportunity to kind of prove myself, because the meat department really helped prove myself to me what I was capable of doing.
Yeah, because you never really did anything like that before in your
Yeah, I
life.
was always
Like
kind of considered
cutting
just a
meat.
problem. I was considered a problem, right? Always getting in trouble. You're gonna end
Hmm.
up in jail. You do drugs. There's no hope for you, you know. And so here I am now rising to the rankings, so like the top of this whole industry, and like it felt good, you know. I felt like wow, because I always believed in myself, and so I was able to show it to myself and to show it to all my loved ones too. Like wow, this guy became a, you know, like
Well,
that's
it's just another example of how if you try, you can really do what you want to do. Like how you graduated, you were able to really try for that test and you aced it. And then,
amen.
you know, you're trying at work, and then next thing you know, you're getting promoted and moving up, and you're seeing your potential grow each day, each year. Um, but I know how we were talking about these drugs you're doing, you're kind of also getting into a little bit more of trouble. Were you ever arrested? And what were you arrested for, if so?
Yeah, so I got arrested for well, I've been arrested a few times to go, not to backtrack, but my senior
Yeah.
year I got arrested for fourth degree theft, right? Fourth degree theft. But as an adult, what I got
Yeah.
arrested for as an adult, I got charged in California. I got a DUI out here. And that was a really big turning point for me.
Okay. How old were you when you did that?
20, 21. I had to be
So
between,
were you legal to drink, or like, because that probably would have been worse, right? If you're
yeah, so I was 21. I just was
okay.
about 21. Yep, there you go. You're
And
right.
how do they get like tell us that story, the DUI, like what happened?
Yeah, so it was my day off of work. I just was a brand new meat manager, not even doing it for like I think 6 months. And my day off, we had a company visit the following day. So my day off, and then that Friday, I think it was, we had a corporate visit. So a lady was flying in from Arizona. She was visiting 5 stores, you know, to check the conditions. So it was
Hmm.
a big deal, right? I was supposed to go in at like 3 a.m. on that next morning, but so me and that meat manager, my friend, we go day drinking all day long at Redondo Beach, and around 6 o'clock now, and we're taking painkillers too. So I was taking Norcos on top of this, right? So I'm on painkillers, I'm drinking, I'm feeling really good. We're kind of wandering around the pier and whatnot. And we go to leave. And I remember my buddy calling me. My buddy called me, goes, "Hey, dude," he goes, "you should pull over, man. I don't think you're okay to drive." And because I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, "You just swerved." I guess I pulled out of the parking spot, and I like swerved out of there hard. He was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm fine. Da, 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 I'm fine." I hang up, and I'm on PCH right there in Redondo Beach, right? Like Hermosa Beach, in between Hermosa and Redondo. And there's a St. Rock bar. And I'm in the far right lane, and that lane turns into parking. And so I'm going probably about 30, 40 miles an hour, and I end up hitting the parked car. That car hit the car in front of it. That car hit the car in front of it. Then my car bounced back and hit the car to my left, which had a family of it.
Oh
Lady
no.
lady said she couldn't move, got taken a neck brace. So it came out to a 5-car accident, including my car, with a bodily injury because she got taken to the hospital in a neck brace saying she can't move. So that instantly becomes a felony. So it was a felony DUI with a 5-car accident. I had to take a breathalyzer. I did the whole test, the whole everything. I blew 3 times the limit. So I blew a 0.24. Um, and it was a really dark time for me. Yeah. And my bail
So
came out.
yeah, what was your bail?
So I got arrested, um, booked in that night. And then my bail was $100,000 to get out. And the thing was, I had that corporate visit. So I'm paranoid the whole time. Like, I got to get out of here. I got to go to work. I got to go prepare for this visit, even though I'm drunk and whatnot. That's how I was. I could still go to work, and once I sober up and flush it out, I'm back to goods. And I'm just thinking I got to get out of here. And so my bail was $100,000, and it's Friday, and so Friday morning now, and like they're like, you won't be able to see the judge till Monday or Tuesday. And I'm like, I can't be in here till Monday or Tuesday. I got work every day. I'm like, I'm probably gonna lose and I can't call anybody because I don't know what they're thinking. And I'm just kind of paranoid and stressed out in there. And that's what kind of got me to bail myself out. So I ended up bailing myself out. I didn't have $10,000 because you have to pay 10% of the $100,000, which is 10 grand, which I didn't have saved up. So I had to call, I had a list of bail bonds, and I halfway down the list, this lady was willing to take payments from me with no interest. And it was a blessing. And so I ended up bailing myself out of jail instead of waiting it out.
Mhm.
And yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So you weren't fired from work.
No, I didn't get fired from work.
That's good. But eventually you ended up quitting your job. Like you said, you were doing that for 12 years. So you quit. So what would you say is the reason you quit after doing that for so long? I mean, to like here we are right now. Is it because of this? Because of what changed?
Well, there's a lot of factors that kind of played into it, but I guess you'd say this whole experience this past year, 2020 and whatnot, kind of just showed me true colors in my company and how they feel about their employees. Health kind of became a big factor for me, and so I just kind of realized the meat that I was selling was a lot of GMO corn, GMO soybeans. And so I just wasn't proud of what I was doing anymore. I didn't like who I was working for anymore. And so I stepped down from management, and then I was cutting meat for about like a year and a half as a second man. And I finally was like, I don't belong here anymore. I feel like God is calling me to other places.
Okay, and so now, like you're saying, God's calling you to other places. So I know you went through that phase in your life where there was no God. There was no like,
Yep.
why am I here right now? I shouldn't be in this position. This, why me? There's no God. So when was that turning point then for you to go back onto this path now of, believing and going to church?
Yeah, for sure. So 6 years ago in 2015, when I first moved out here and I got hired at the Vons, I not only did I meet my buddy in the meat department, I also met this other friend of mine named Aaron. And we actually got hired the same day together, right? We both took the same drug test and got hired the same day. And I won't forget, I go to meet the manager in front of the store. He goes, "Are you ready to take your test?" And I'm like, "What test?" He's like, "Your drug test." I'm like, "Oh, wow, I'm already taking a drug test, because I just smoked weed before this interview." Right. And I'm like, "Oh my goodness." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Yeah, I guess I'm ready." And we go up to his office and we go upstairs, and there's Aaron sitting there, just took his test. And the manager goes in his office to get the kit. And I won't forget, Aaron looks at me and goes, "You worried about the drug test?" And I was like, "Who is this guy to ask me that?" And I look at him in the eye. I'm like, "Not at all." But really I was, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm worried." You know what I mean? But I didn't want to show any like
Yeah.
weakness and so it was just funny because that was our first conversation to each other. And he became one of my best friends. So when I first moved out here, he was like my brother that showed me to all the parties. He trained. He was a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. And so he had a lot of the kind of similar backgrounds to me and similar interests to me. He loved MMA. He loved to party. He loved to experiment with drugs. And so we kind of became partners in crime. He showed me so much of life in California, like introduced me to so many people. And he was like my partner in crime. That's the best way to describe him. And it's just so beautiful because he has family in Maui. So like I reminded him of his cousins in Maui, and that's kind of what brought us so close together. He loved the Hawaiian lifestyle. He loved that culture. He loved that realness. And so, yeah, what really opened my eyes with God and how I found God and Jesus would be, so Aaron was this party guy with me, and he actually got 2 DUIs. And so on his second DUI, he had to go to LA County Jail. And in LA County Jail, he found God and Jesus through the Lord's Prayer. He did this Lord's Prayer, and he comes out of jail after 2 weeks in there, and he has a whole pursuit on following God. And I'm thinking like, okay, I'm just happy he's sober, right? Because I could tell he wants to be sober. And I'm like, wow, man, you're going to be clear-minded. Whenever he was sober, he was so clear-minded. So I'm like, awesome, dude, you're going to be sober. He has a whole pursuit on following God. And it just starts manifesting him volunteering all these places. Then he wants to go to this discipleship training school in Australia where like they help you really learn the Bible and how to help spread the good news and make disciples and help glorify God and kind of spread that message to others. So he goes to school in Australia, and then he calls me one day and he goes, "I'm going to the Big Island to the sailing school to become a missionary." And I'm like, sailing school? The guy couldn't even swim. When I knew him in California, he couldn't swim. And I'm like, you can't swim though. He's like, yeah, I know, but I feel like God's calling me. I'm going to learn how to swim. And I'm like, what is going on? But he's sober. So I'm like, awesome, dude. You're sober. You're going to love Hawaii. You're going to be based out of Hawaii. You're going to see some amazing places when you travel. I'm like, I'm like, all for it, bro. I'm all for it. So he moves to Hawaii and he loves it, becomes a missionary, goes to Marshall Islands, Micronesia, Papua New Guinea, all these places that don't see any vessels or any kind of humanity really. And he was reaching out and bringing them supplies, bringing them Bibles, bringing them soccer balls, just loving them, just going there to love.
You watch him go from this partier in California to like a whole nother person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I watched him to become to a second DUI where he was taking someone's Xanax, can't even speak a sentence to. Now going around the world on this mission trip and this
changing lives.
Yeah, and it was profound. He had this peace to him that I can't even describe. And so 6 years ago, he was about to go on a 6-month mission to the Marshall Islands. They had a boat full of supply, diesel fuel, all types of things. You know, it was going to be a big, long mission. I think it was one of the longest missions he's done. And a storm rolls into Hawaii. So a storm comes in and the protocol is to take the boat out of the harbor. Because if it stays in the harbor, it's going to get dinged up from all the waves, right? That's going to destroy the boat. So protocol is to take the boat outside the harbor. So him and 5 crewmen take the boat 6 miles offshore. They're waiting the storm out. And the next morning around 5 a.m, a wave comes and hits the beam of their boat and flips their sailboat. Everyone ended up surviving that accident except my friend Aaron. And so it's crazy because that same night, so that night that I found out about this, that same day, you could say, I was in Huntington Beach. I was in Long Beach with my buddies and we're on their parents. So their dad's sailboat. It was a bunch of their dad and his friends. And then we went on the sailboat with the dad and his friends and they're playing guitar and music. And they're talking to us about Jesus. And none of us know Jesus. Like literally, we're all like, yeah, but I know of what Aaron's been telling me, right? So I'm like, you know what? I got a friend actually that turned his whole life around. And they're like, man, that's so beautiful. You got to stay close to that guy. And like just telling us that, encouraging us to start reading the Bible and seeking Jesus. And so I end up leaving the boat, go home, and I jump on Facebook and his brother says, please pray for my brother. His boat just flipped off the coast of the Big Island. And I'm like, no way, you know? So then I hit up his brother, call me right now, call his brother. Yeah, the boat flipped. And I'm like, okay, they're going to find him. Right. Because like, that was the thing. He was missing. So the boat flipped. They saved everyone except Aaron, but Aaron was missing. They couldn't find the body. So I'm like, okay, they're going to find him. Right. The whole state of Hawaii, every search and rescue's out. And that's when mom called me and was like, I'm watching the news right now. Is this your friend Aaron? And it just started becoming more real. Right. And I was like, and then 3 days passed and I'm like, dude, they still can't find him. And I'm like, what? He's a survivor. He's like me. We're going to survive. Like, where are you? What are you doing? And at this point, I've lost some close people, right? Like I have a tattoo for a friend that overdosed on Oxycontin. I've lost close people, my stepdad, my abuela, like there was a lot of people in this time where I've lost, but with him, it didn't matter. For all the rest of them, I could understand why they died, right? They got sick, they got cancer, the way that they lived, I could justify they weren't maybe the best perfect people, or like I could reason why their death happened. But with this one, with my friend, it didn't make sense. Because it was like, this friend of mine went from being the worst person of society to the ideal person in society. Like I'm thinking, like, if there's a God, why would you do this? Why would you destroy something that's so beautiful and profound? And so it just hit me differently. And I realized that they weren't going to find him. And I realized, like, after 3 or 4 days, the search slowly stopped and they kind of accepted his body missing. And that's when it just became real to me that he's gone. And I'm like, and I was mad. I think I was mad because when I got my DUI, he really helped me stay sober. So when I got my DUI, I stopped drinking for like 7 months. So I stopped drinking and I was calling him a lot more. And that's kind of what got us really close. We'd talk like 2 or 3 times a week and we'd FaceTime for hours. And he got to tell me a lot about what he was going through. And so that's what kind of brought us really close. And so when he was gone, it was just this void that was like, didn't make sense to me. I was irritated. I was mad. And he helped me get to a place where I would talk out loud in the shower. I didn't want to call it God, but I'd have this conversation with this like voice in the shower. And he helped me get to that point by stopping to drink. So I stopped drinking, and then I kind of started talking to this voice in the shower, because his voice became a lot more apparent as I was like clear-minded. It was like a conversation I would have. So Aaron goes, and I started having this conversation with, I don't want to call it God, but it was God at the time. And I'm like, why would you take Aaron? Right. And I'm like screaming out loud to this like voice, like, it doesn't make sense. He's like, I was so emotional. I dwelled for about a month, and it got so bad where I just went through a nasty breakup. And I was at this point in my life where I was like, why is there any point of doing good? Right. If you die and it's over and you could be the best person, not like, what's the point of doing good? Cause I've seen so much success in darkness. Like I've seen, a lot of people who cheat a lot of their marriages, get a lot of big houses, right? A lot of people that like steal and lie sometimes like prosper. They do really good. So I'm like, why is there any point of doing good? Like if there is no, like if I watch my friend turn his life around, and this is what happened, he didn't have a family. You took him at 23 years old. It just became no point of doing good for me. And I was at this point where I was like, because I still did good a little bit. I was like, I'm going to do good a little bit. But there was a point where I was like, there's no point of doing good anymore. And so in a month, I was dealing with all these emotions. And February 1st, so January 3rd was his accident. February 1st, I'm at work. It's a normal day. I go on my lunch break like I normally do. I get in my car. I start my car. And all of a sudden, I get this warm feeling like all over me, like this, like something hugging me kind of thing. And I get this voice, like as if Aaron called me on the phone. And it was the most clear, profound thing I've ever gone through in my life. And what he told me was that everything he told me was true. He's the happiest he's ever been in his life, and that I know what to do. And from that moment, it was like, the way I describe it's like I was riding my horse and someone just pushed me off the horse, and everything I thought I knew about everything went out the window. It was gone. It was gone. And I was like, I had it all wrong. I had it wrong. There is a heaven. There is an afterlife. And it just everything became so real to me. And I happened to have that next Sunday off. And so I used to drive by the Hope Chapel at the Vons where I met him at. And something said, go to Hope Chapel, go to Hope Chapel, go to Hope Chapel. And because of all the drugs I've done in my lifestyle, I used to like laugh at church people, like I'd be like, they're a joke. And now I'm here telling myself to go to a church, and like, I'm worried about how I'm going to be judged and how they're going to view me, because I'm like, they're not going to accept me, but I'm like, I don't care. If they don't accept me, that's fine. All I know is I would give him my neck, that my friend's in heaven, and that he served this man named Jesus. And I want to know who this man is. That's it. Right. If he served this man named Jesus, everything he told me was true, and he's in heaven, then I want to know who this man named Jesus is. And I will figure it out. And so from that led me to go to church that Sunday. And a kid came up to me in the back and said, hey, is this your first time here? And I was like, here we go. I'm going to tell him the story. And I'm telling the story. He went to meet the pastor, and it just became a wrap from there. I didn't realize, I thought I was kind of crazy. I mean, the next 2 days I wrestled with myself. Like, you wanted to hear that. You didn't really hear that. But something inside me said, if you don't act on this, it's going to be the most disrespectful thing you've ever done in your life. And so with that, I went to church, I met the pastor. I told him my story. He was like, wow. And then I want to know everything there is to know about Jesus. So I volunteered at everything I could, Bible studies, every Tuesday service, Thursday service, anything I could learn about the word in this Bible. I want to read it. I want to learn about it. Because now that I know it's true, that because I've this experience, now I want to like dive in, and that's kind of what led me to my relationship with God and Jesus. And it's just, I'm forever grateful. Like I say, when I die, I can't wait to see Jesus, and I can't wait to see Aaron, because I have this faith because of Aaron.
And all those other close family members and friends, obviously, too, that you're excited to see.
Yeah.
But let's talk about real quick, after you did go to church on a regular basis and stuff, and you learn more about Jesus, you decided, to give your testimony to the church and get baptized, right? So how was that? How did that feel, getting all that out and like,
Yeah.
diving in? Yeah.
So that was really good. When I started learning about everything, I learned that Jesus tells us to get baptized, right? To have the old die and the new rise. And so with that being said, I was like, I want to get baptized. So I told my pastor, I want to get baptized. And he goes, would you mind sharing your testimony in front of the congregation? I said, yeah, no problem. And so Aaron's mom actually came to that baptism, and it was real profound because she was her first time hearing my story, and so it was an honor to be able to share that story and how much it impacted people. I had people come to me months after, like, thanking me for sharing that story, and it was just my honest truth, right? And I was really just wanting to get baptized because Jesus told me to get baptized, and me sharing that story, I saw so much fruit come from it and how much people it affected and benefited, and I was just like, it amazed me what God can do through, like, and that's why this podcast has started, because like I realized God does so many things in people's lives that deserve to be shared, that deserve to shine light on it, because God's at work every day, all day. And we shouldn't be ashamed of glorifying that and sharing that, because it gives us hope. It gives us a relationship, and so I've been encouraged to continue to share this good news that God's blessed me with, because he didn't have to let that happen, right? He didn't have to let Aaron speak to me. He did not need to do that. I didn't deserve it. I wasn't living a righteous lifestyle or a godly good lifestyle. It just, I got this news. I got this information, and I just want to give it back to the world.
Yeah, and I think that's something special that, he obviously had an impact on you, and his mom saw that, and people at church saw that, and you also impacted other people, which is cool to see, like, the way people responded to your testimony. I remember, me, I wasn't really going to church on a regular basis at that time either, but hearing your testimony and seeing what you went through in your path of, going from being bullied, going from just all the potholes in your life to where you are now, was kind of like, oh wow, there is hope. There is something out there that maybe is above us, above that we can even process really, or try to truly understand. Like, we want to understand as much as possible, but it's just like, there's that greater power that's gonna, so when I heard your testimony, I was like, oh wow. And I started going to church, and I started listening and trying to, like, dive into the Bible, and I was talking to my friends about church and going with friends, and next thing you know, it just starts spreading, and you're just really diving in and building this relationship. Yeah. And I don't know if it was you who told me this or someone, maybe I heard it at church, but how you can never really have a testimony without a test. And I remember hearing that and just thinking, that's so true. And I remember first person I thought of was you. I was like, Ashton's had his test. He's had his test, and now he's doing his testimony, and he's finding his path, and he's finding God and listening to the word. And it's awesome to see that. Now, a couple closing remarks that I want to get from you, after all these different troubling experiences that you went through in your life, from, when you were 5 to right now, with the losses that you've had in your life, the friendships that you've lost, all that stuff. How do you always find an optimistic outlook on things? What would you say, like, how do you always try to still remain positive, still walk around with a smile on your face with the troubling experiences you've had, the people you've lost in your life? What is it? What would you say?
It's a good question, man. I would say it's honestly the hope I have, right? I have this hope that when I die, I'm going to an eternal paradise. So with that hope, it's allowed me to love differently than I've ever loved before. Like, I was always a closed off person, like, before I had gone in my life, it was always like, if you come into my life, you have to have something to offer me or give me, or you're nobody, right? If you're not up on my level or par, I would just shine you out. I would dismiss you, talk bad about you. Like,
you said, you had anger management. Yeah.
I had anger management. Yeah. And control issues. And I thought I knew it all. And I was ego-centered, and all these things, and selfish. And I realized it's all these things I was, and I didn't think I was. Like, I thought I was kind of a good, normal person, like, and God just kind of, he humbled me, showed me, like, how much I have to learn, and it's not done. I'm still growing, so my optimistic look, though, is that when I die, I know where I'm going. I know that I'm going to a place far greater than I can describe. That's greater than anything on earth can show us. And with that, I just strive to be more Christ-like, but it's not easy. It takes a lot of staying in the word, staying true, praying every day, seeking God, and really staying aligned with him. Because if you stop seeking him, it's easy to fall into the world and what the world offers. And so that just gives me my optimistic look. And as I'm still on earth, I try to make as many relationships as I can that I'm going to know them forever, and that they know God at least, or they give God a chance, because I never did, right? I was so close-minded to God that he like had to do this thing to me to show his power. Right? I would have not, like, you could have, I wasn't open-minded to it. I was so like I said, knew it all, self-centered. And I wasn't open to it. And that was like the only way God could do it in my life, to really show me that there's more to life than just like these things that we accumulate on earth, right? Because when you die, they go. And so it's about relationships to me. It's about working for eternity for me.
That's awesome. Building those relationships and having that hope. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, when you're taking your shower and you had a clear mind because you were sober, I mean, your sobriety, how long have you been sober now?
So yeah, I stopped drinking for about 4.5 years. It's been about April 7th.
So I'm sure that also has to do with a little bit being optimistic and less negative, because you have that clear mind, like you're saying, when you're sober. And so you've been sober for 4.5 years, which is amazing. And that's great. I mean, so what would 30-year-old Ashton right now, 30-year-old Ashton, if you could go back in time and say something to 15-year-old Ashton, any piece of advice or anything, like what would you tell him? If you could go back to that 15-year-old Ashton, maybe before the wilderness program, or even after, like when you're a senior, somewhere in that window, what would you go tell that Ashton?
That's a good question. I would tell him not to worry. Yeah, I would tell him, don't worry, it's going to be okay. And just to trust the people who love you.
Amen.
Yeah,
That's
trust the people that love you, and don't lean on your own understanding. Yeah, because I think that we get caught up a lot. Like, I'll figure it out. I don't need anybody, but we do need each other. And yeah, that don't lean on yourself, trust God, and choose love even when it doesn't make sense. That's what I would have told my 15-year-old self. And don't worry, it's gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay.
I mean, there are a lot of 15-year-olds out there who have not experienced nearly anything that you experienced at that age. So, I mean, going back and having that conversation, just after seeing what you went through in your life and how here you are today, you got through it, you survived it. Don't worry, don't overthink the big things. And what's one piece of advice that you want to pass on to someone who's listening right now? Someone who's listening to this podcast, someone who's watching you, hearing your testimony, seeing how the things that you went through in your life, what's one piece of advice you want to give that person, regardless of their age?
Don't isolate yourself. I think a lot of times we could isolate ourselves because we think no one wants to hear us, or no one wants to listen, or no one loves you, or no one cares about you. So always reach out to somebody, because there are a lot of people who do care, who want to listen. And so don't ever let the enemy try to trick you in that way, that you're not good enough, or not to reach out. And don't isolate yourself, so just surround yourself with community and with people of love, and reach out to people when you're going through something, or you feel a time of need.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I'm sure your audience will appreciate that. So it's been great having this conversation with you. I'm glad I'm really grateful you asked me to, talk to you and help tell your story. I'm super excited for this podcast. I can't wait to see what it flourishes into. And I hope you just keep it up, keep pushing for it, keep getting the word out there. Everyone has a story to tell. And I think this platform is a great way to do that. You can get so many other people's stories out there and hear their perspective on things, and help other people cope with what they're going through in life, because they'll hear that and they'll maybe hear, like you're saying, hope. They might have hope after hearing your story. They might have hope after hearing someone else's story. So it's really cool what you're doing. Keep it up, man. And it's been good talking to you for the last hour and a half, hour.
No, thank you, man. I really appreciate you are the one that were to do this interview. You know me best. You, like you said, know my old self to who I am today. And I'm not perfect. I don't want anyone out there to think that I've made it or I'm godly now and it's just over. Like I still constant growth, constant tests, constant trials. And so every day, if I could just get a little better than I was yesterday, you know, I'm winning in my head and seeking God every day, day in and day out. That's my goal. And so I'm just so grateful, Ryan, that you were the one to do this interview, that you were the one to ask me these questions, you know, and it's just deep because a lot of 15-year-olds do worry a lot, you know, and have a lot of stress and things that like they shouldn't worry about, you know, and
They're getting bullied. They're being told they're
yeah,
not good enough. They're
yeah,
trying
yep,
drugs.
yep.
Yeah.
And they do things that they don't want to do necessarily, but they do because they're worrying, you know, there's so much worry that like I have to do this or I need to go there. So yeah, I'm so grateful that you were the one to do this interview. I'm excited for this podcast to continue to just show people's stories and people's lives and how God comes through and God gives hope. I'm telling you, God is so powerful when you seek him. And so hopefully just with interviewing people, this just helps glorify God, right? That's for glory podcast for glorifying God and just talking story that brings glory. So
And
thank you, Ryan.
do you have a email that people can reach out to you and like maybe, you know, ask for some
Yeah,
advice or send some questions?
we're going to have it down at the bottom of the screen. So
Cool. Okay.
you have your information. If anyone wants to find you on Instagram or whatnot, they have my Instagram. So you guys can follow me, reach out to us, message us. If you guys have an incredible story you'd like me to hear, please reach out to me. I love you all. I appreciate you all. Trust God. And thank you, Ryan, so much. I love you. I love you a
Love you
lot.
too. And I think one more thing real quick before we head out, maybe if you can, if it's close, maybe you should show your audience that photo of Aaron's boat, because I think that is one of the most impactful photos I've ever seen.
All right. So yeah, Aaron's mom took this photo and she took this photo a few days after the whole accident, right? The ship washed up on the shore and she went down one day by herself just to get some peace. So she went down there and there was a ray of sunlight beaming directly onto the boat as she went down to just kind of check it out and get a peace of mind. And that was her way of Aaron speaking to her, letting her know that he's okay.
Not to worry.
Yep.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's touching, man. That's powerful.
And the verse you wrote on the back, I didn't realize this. The sun will no more be your light by day, for the Lord will be your everlasting light.
It's true. Amen. All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, man.
Yep. I love you. I appreciate you. Thank you so much. All right.
Love you too.
Woo. So that was an emotional podcast. It was just an honor to have my blood brother who grew up with me and kind of saw me transform through all these experiences, interview me about my story. So if you made it this far, I am so grateful. I greatly appreciate you. And thank you for sticking around and listening. And please subscribe and like if you want to see more, because we're going to continue to just bring glory to God and share other people's testimonies. So I greatly appreciate you all. Thank you so much for being here and taking time out of your day to listen to my story. So God bless you all. And I hope you guys all have an amazing rest of your day. Thank you.